Brilliant. You're just in time for the discussion that we started on the town hall. We're wondering 58 years after independence, why is tribe still a factor in the Kenyan politics and how can it be addressed? Hashtag Monday Reporter Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. We'd like to read your views during this broadcast. Let me introduce my guest one more time, beginning from my immediate left, Ashura Michael. She's a member of the National Government Affirmative Action Fund. Thank you so much for coming in. Sylvia Muturi will be the sign language interpreter. Also, next is Muthiora Kariara, former presidential running mate 2017. Thank you so much for coming in. And Reverend Dr. Samuel Kobia, NCIC chairperson. Thank you so much for making time for us this evening. And Shiko Kihika, who's the founder, Tribeless Youth, joining us all the way from Nakuru. She's joining us online. And Rev, I'll start with you. Have we matured enough as a democracy to divorce tribe from our national politics?
Well, you know, 58 years ago, when the country became independent, we had the best chance, the best opportunity to actually have politics based on ideology, but we blew it up. We missed that opportunity. The reason being that if 60 years or 58 years ago, there was the intention to run the politics of this country based on ideology, it could have succeeded. Because when you look at the political leaders of that time, who belonged to the very young political parties, at that time, those political parties were not tribally based. And that is where we should have continued and being very intentional in making sure that we will not transform those political parties from being ideologically based to tribally based. Tanzania did well, but in fact, if you know, even Chama cha Mapinduzi, or TANU at that time, it copied from the KAU and the KANU of Kenya. And then it went on, and because there was the leadership of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, who was so intentional in having a foundation, a strong foundation, ideologically based political party. That is where we went wrong. And unless we trace back and begin now to have ideologically based political parties, then we will still continue to lament that our politics are still tribally based. And therefore, one way of overcoming this problem we have is for the political parties that we have to begin to intentionally become ideologically based. But we are not there yet.
We are not
and
there
we
yet.
have a long way to go if what is happening today is anything to go by. You'll find that any major political party here has an ethnically based foundation and the leadership. Everything else comes after that. But that's where actually we are going wrong. And it would have been easier if ODM, Jubilee now could have continued to be ideologically based, but it is not the case at the moment.
All right. Muthiora, you've jumped into the fray before. Is that the situation? Can we entirely blame the politicians?
We have to blame our forefathers. We chose democracy as the path to go, but if you look at things today, what democracy do we have in Kenya? If close to 1 million Kenyans can decide on who their leader is going to be, and then that is overturned by a small group of people. So first of all, we need to get right the leadership that suits us best, because clearly the democracy we aspired to have is out of place. And secondly, in order for those in power to perpetuate themselves, they chose to divide us. And they did not even get a new way to divide us, but then they used the same path that the colonialists had used. And that's where we lost it. I'm glad that on this panel today we have a person I respect, and he's called it exactly as it is. What we need to do is to be sincere with ourselves and accept that we have failed and we cannot continue as we've been doing. We have to reboot, we have to restart. and own up to the mess we have created for ourselves.
All right. Ashura, is this entirely a leadership issue?
Somehow it is. Look, like what my colleague has said, that if you look at Kenya, when you look back 15 years ago, we have the colonials who had colonized us. And after independence, we've seen that the change that Kenya has going forward, we are still trying to copy because we have the self-interest and selfish interest as well. Because the Constitution of Kenya, if you look at the Constitution of Kenya, it is very clear because it talks about, there's nothing that talks about tribalism or individualism. So we need to really change and see how we can make that change, because it's an individual responsibility, because politics has really influenced us. If you look at 30th July in 1997, we saw the political violence that had happened as well in Kenya, because most people had lost their lives. Kenyans need to look back at the country, and also like Zimbabwe, we can look at Zimbabwe and Burundi countries, because what has happened because of elections and the tribalism, they've really been affected, the citizens of those two countries, and they're languishing in poverty. So if the constitution is there, even the BBI, we can see that people are tribalism. They focus, yes, this is my tribe, I'm Luo. And what the NCIC chair has said is very clear about Tanzania, because if you look at Tanzania, they have over 120 tribes, which is 3 times the tribes that we have in Kenya. So that means that Kenya can do better than Tanzania. But you're wondering, where are we going wrong? Where are we failing? And BBI, if you look at BBI, it talks about there is no division. It tells us how we can implement that, the ethos on how we can be united and how we can take responsibility, because Kenya is not about government or politics. Kenya is about me and you. We need to see that it's about blood, it's about united and our land and our soil. So we don't look at the tribes, we look at Kenyans.
All right. Thanks, Ashura. And let's bring in Shiko on this. Shiko, where do you think the issue really lies? Because you're the founder of Tribeless Youth. What necessitated that to begin with?
Trevor, I think the issue is our politicians. It's been clear before, and it's clear even right now. They are still driving the same notion or the same conversation about who is the bigger block when it comes to votes. I like the fact that Ashura has brought in the BBI aspect. But my bigger question when it comes to this document is the people who've divided us again and again, the people who are responsible for whatever went down in Kenya in 2007, 2008, are the same people who are telling us that we can actually have a peaceful, or rather, we can still solve this menace through them. That cannot work, because we know very well that we're in a country whereby every 5 years, we have to be reduced or taken back into a tribal cocoons so that certain people can benefit from this. Are we willing to do this? Tribeless Youth is generally a journey to show people that beyond tribes, there are deeper issues. And actually, Kenyans can sit down and discuss their issues. Like right now, there are so many issues. We talk about young people and whatever they're going through. This is not about tribes, it's about governance. Are we addressing governance when we are addressing tribes? No, we are not. So for me, it's about us being honest, like Muthura said, us being honest with ourselves, us being honest and going back to our history and saying, where did we go wrong? When did the rain start beating us, Trevor?
All right. Let me bring you in, the Reverend, on this. What is your take when the president himself alludes to the fact that only 2 tribes have led this country? Does it then create an us versus them exclusion of the other 42, or inclusion of the other 42?
Well, I think what the president really was basing his statement on is the importance of inclusion. Once you feel you are excluded, then obviously you want to consider others as them and we. And what I heard, or the way I read it, is that we need to have now a discourse as a people, as a country, on how we can go all of us together instead of we and them or them and us. And until we manage to consider ourselves as having one destiny that we can then go together and then find out how can we actually include everybody and everybody feel they are included. Yeah. That is, I think, where the discourse should be. Now, whether it is a rotational presidency, even that is, in my view, not really the answer, because rotation then, what are the criteria? Yeah. You know, there has been a mention of Switzerland, for example, as having rotational presidency. Yeah. I lived in Switzerland for over 20 years. The rotation is not regionally based, is not the French or German or Italian, but it is political parties. And it is the strength of the political parties. When it is your turn to now name a president, yeah, then is your political party which will name it. So it is not really regional or ethnically based. Yeah. So really where we needed to do is what would be the best arrangement where we feel that it's not we versus them, but all of us together. And agree is a long way to go. Because if we were to talk of 43 ethnic groups going around, you know, in 300 years, yeah, we don't even have gone around. Yeah. So the complexity of it is what needed to be addressed. Yeah. And I would expect that there are ways in which we can begin to address that, including the devolution. And this is where I think rather than putting so much premium and emphasis on the presidency, yeah, we have to make the presidency least attractive, yeah, if we want people to then look at how we are going to use devolution, okay, as actually the best organizing and planning ideology, yeah, in this country, so that the resources, there are more resources, mm-hmm, that are going to the counties, yeah, and many people feel that we can feel ourselves included into the national economy, yeah, not because we have a president from our tribe, but because we have a way of organizing our resources and everybody feels that they have equal opportunities, okay, to access those resources.
All right. Ashura, let me bring you in on this issue of rotational presidency. What do you think? Is that a solution?
I think, like before what I had said, if you look at the politics, as Kenyans, we have truly failed, because when you look at politics, but we need to look at how inclusivity can happen. The Constitution of Kenya, Article 7, is clear about national language, how we can make sure that the national language becomes the tool that can lead us, that can unite us as Kenyan people. For example, if you talk about political parties, it's what has broken us. Even after every 5 years, we keep on disintegrating again and again. If you look at politics, we need to look at how people at the grassroots level are interacting with each other. We can share, we have the private sharing, how both can unite and interact and coordinate. But if you look at the politics and the rotational, like the presidential that we're hearing, I think it will not help us. You've talked about that we have that rotational, but this issue has been, you know, there in Kenya because we have 2 terms as per the constitution for the president, because he's trying to tell us how we need to change this. Because also we need to change about focusing on the tribe of the president, where they're coming from. We need to not only talk about this, but how to empower our people so that there is equity, how the resources are also shared equitable. How can this be done? How can we access businesses, entrepreneurship, all these drivers that drive the economy as well, that unite us as Kenyans? But if you have, you know, variances of resources being shared, that makes us become more enmity.
Okay. Mudiora, what are your thoughts on this? Because is devolution even a solution then?
Devolution is part of the solution because it takes power to the monarchy at the very lowest level. What we have a problem with is leadership. That has always been our Achilles. Our forefathers divided us based on tribe because they needed to loot. They started with land and then it went to the other resources. And in order to have cover, they instigated one tribe against the other. When our current president's political father took over, that's President Daniel Moi, he was fiercely fought by, sorry to say this, a clique of Kikuyu leaders. And in order to survive, he now went straight on to divide Kenya along tribal lines. That was his only way to survive. So when our president currently comes and pulls out a stunt like the one he did, I'm not surprised. Which takes me to why I felt he was not competent enough to be president in 2017 and supported someone else for that position. What we need to do as a people is to hold our leaders accountable. At the moment, we all know that it doesn't pass a day when we do not look back to 2007. And we know that then our president and the deputy president went on to be suspects. They were charged with crimes against humanity. So it's the quality of leaders we have that keeps perpetuating this problem. So that's what we must address at the moment. We must face it head on. But our problem is we elect our leaders so casually, as if it's not our future we are determining when doing so.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I would wish for us to focus on building institutions, political parties per se, because politics in Kenya is like everything. It's where the resources are distributed. And then let's have these political parties have the decorum to know that the governance of a nation is the most important thing. Because if we had strong political parties currently, our president would be facing impeachment proceedings as we speak. But even before we got here, we know that from previous instances, his government has refused to obey court orders and has done a number of things showing that they can get away with it. So I plead that as a nation, let's have a moment to reflect.
Okay.
And let's not continue on this treacherous path.
Okay.
We were here, and I'm glad NCIC chair is here, when the very divisive narrative about hustlers and dynasty began. We did not do anything. We've walked that road so far, and now people are saying, even so-and-so did that and that, and you never went after them, so you can't now come after us now.
Okay.
Action must start to unravel today.
Okay. Shiko, how do we foster cohesion? Because the young people who you deal with a lot, form more than 70% of the population, then they have a mind of their own. You cannot, I refuse to be convinced that after every 5 years, all of a sudden now, they realize that their friends are from this tribe or that tribe.
I think we basically don't listen to young people, because out here young people are crying over this 1.5% tax that has been slapped on us. Because a government that tells us that it will give us a 7 years tax holiday is now slapping us with extra taxes. And they're like, if you listened to what these young people want, then cohesion would not be a problem. If we had political parties that are based on ideologies, political parties that don't go tribal every time they want certain seats, then I think cohesion is not a problem. And I think honestly, and having Dr. here from NCIC, just having him here and having just him knowing that he sits in a position where this institution was formed so that it can help us with the cohesion issue. And if we reflect honestly, we have not even made a step towards that. Why is it that? Because this is an issue of morals. This is an issue of values. where do we stand when it comes to electing our leaders, like Muthiora has said? We elect people to go buy themselves clothes and houses and, take big cars and take huge loans. And then we never ask ourselves, how sustainable is this for the generations to come? Trevor, those who will be going to vote right now, and majority of them are people just out of high school, other people, like majority of them have never voted any one time. And now they're seated and listening to their folks, and some of us actually having the conversation of the hustler, the dynasty, and who owes who what, and who will do what. Nobody is telling them that if you vote this person in, then your future is sort of promising. Because most of them don't have a future right now. You look at it, and it's about Tala, and I said this before with you, Trevor, it's about Tala, M-Kopa, M-Shwari, and all those platforms that are there for young people to keep borrowing money to repay other debts. And then now we are here, this month we're starting to pay our SGR loan, and who's gonna pay for that? Because most of us don't have jobs. So how are we going to service that? So the key thing is us going back and listening to what are the actual problem. And the actual problem is our young people need to be employed, need jobs, need sustainable economy. Okay. Our young people need to afford school, need to afford to go to hospital. This is what is critical to them, and they need to be assured of their future, Trevor.
Okay. Let me just, Trevor, I think it's good to interrogate a little bit further this hustler dynasty dichotomy. When it started, I, as chair of NCIC, made a comment and warned those that are then trying to divide Kenyans between hustlers and the dynasties, that we have to be very, very careful, because this could lead us to the way of Rwanda or Zimbabwe or Venezuela if we go out of Africa. Anything that divides the Kenyan people between us and them now is dangerous. This is not to say that there is no poverty. Yes, there is poverty. We have the haves and we have the have-nots. Is the best way to handle that the way of class war? That is the question that we need to ask, because I don't think that's the way to go. When you look at the propaganda that led to the genocide in Rwanda, it was talking of the downtrodden, and then you use the radio and the other media to propagate that until you feel that now we are poor because they are rich, and therefore we must go after them. This hustler dynasty, hustler is also relative, really. There is, of course, absolute poverty to deal with. But I think what we need to do is to agree on what is the best way. Is the class war in the 21st century the way to go? The conventional class war as a solution, it doesn't work in the 21st century. Now that is why, as NCIC, what we are planning to do now is to provide a national platform on which we are going to address the issues that are coming up now on the road to the 2022 elections. We unveiled a couple of weeks ago the roadmap to 2022 elections, what we are calling elections bila norma. And what we would like to do in actually 2-3 weeks' time, I'm going to convene a national symposium where we are going to look at ideas that are being put forward today as organizing tools for 2022 elections. And that is why I would like to invite Kenyans to be prepared to really debate this. Hustler versus dynasty. We have had others who have advanced some other ideas, which is a way of trying to say, can we really begin to look at ideas as we prepare for the elections, and not to go through a tool that is divisive and that is going to confront Kenyans between one another. Right, so I just wanted to say that this is something we are planning to do. Yeah, we'll come to election bill and
just a bit. But I see you want to respond, but let me bring in Ashura first on this issue. We are talking about, do you see enough consequences for divisive tribalism? For example, are there enough political consequences such that if someone is found doing that, then they should at least either lose their seats or not be viable to run? Social consequences, are there people who are being named? Criminal consequences, shouldn't someone go to jail? Are our institutions failing us, Ashura?
That issue is it's very, very complicated, and yes, they have failed us. Institutions have failed us. You can imagine where MPs or senators themselves who are lawyers and they represent their own people, I think they are breaking the law, because people who need to, change the law, they would need to achieve something that's different, but it's still the same person who's representing this person who's broken the law. So for us to make this change to happen, I think the MPs and the senators should not be allowed. It's a human right, yes, to be represented if you're accused of a crime, but I think we need to limit ourselves by allowing people from outside counsel of the same team that's there, because I think if you represent on another, it's favoritism that will appear there. There'll be favoritism. So we also are not respecting the judiciary process. Many times, we see people have gone to court, nothing happens, or even we have seen when parliamentary proceeding, nothing happens. If you look at the BBI, the idea of IPOA, I think it should be independent, because that's what BBI is proposing, because right now, IPOA will oversight issues of violence and etc. independently. So we need to focus on making sure that all processes are just and fair, rather than having our own. We need to have, unbiased people who are there, being unbiased and being neutral, so that you're not picking, whether you're in the judiciary or when you're leading your people. You cannot making law and then you're independent. It's not possible. They need to be that neutralism, and that's where we are failing.
Mudiora, you wanted to jump in onto this hustle and dynasty issue.
Yes. Trevor, the first step in solving a problem is in recognizing that there is one, first and foremost. Yeah. In Kenya, we have a rogue government. We must first acknowledge that fact. The Jubilee government came into office when these two gentlemen did their math and realized that if we bring the Kikuyu and the Kalenjin together, we will beat all our other challenges.
No, Mudiora, those are not the only people who voted for them, to be clear.
I am stating it because I have done my research. Votes across all the country. I have had conversation with people, both outside and inside government. We may want to look the other way, but if we do not face reality, then we will not get a solution. That's the arithmetic being done right now. People are saying, if I get this group of people and that other group of people will form the next government. So let's first acknowledge that this is our problem. So if this government does not have the legitimacy to be in office today, what do we do to move forward? We must make sure that we do not repeat the same mistake.
Okay.
So this government came into place based on the premise of dividing Kenyans. And now, again, we have someone looking to occupy the top office by bringing this discussion about a class war, when in fact it's not a class war, because what happens in a class war is the oppressed goes after the oppressor. But in this case, the victims will not be the oppressors. It's going to be all of us. But because it's going to get them into office, they do not care to run the narrative.
Okay.
So we must first own up to our problem.
Okay.
And that is, we've accepted for too long that it's okay to be a tribal nation.
Okay.
It's not okay to be a tribal nation.
All right. I see Ashura wants to jump in on that before I bring in Rev. Ashura, go ahead.
I just wanted to add something about the hustlers and the dynasties narrative. The problem right now is that we are trying to use poverty to separate us people, that this tribe is better than this other tribe, So now we want to start to use that, the poverty narrative, as the hustler narrative. And this is the way to, and I know for the youth, because what my colleague from Tribeless Youth has said, Shiko, that about poverty and the youth, yes, you cannot blame young people because how the politicians are using them. Because as a country, we need to make sure that the young people are moving even in that, you know, development of from one poverty to upscale themselves. So how young people can also benefit themselves because they need to access opportunities like education. How do you reduce the cost of education? Yeah. But right now, when you're talking about hustlers and dynasties and telling them that this fits your profile, yeah, then government are people who are the ones who are implementing the law. Let us look at the resources, then the poverty of the young people, and involving them in the politics so that they can mess up in elections.
All right. Reverend,
yes,
you are charged with ensuring this cohesion, and even here you can see how heated this conversation is.
Right.
So what is the silver bullet now to ensure that the country is back on the right track as 2022 is fast coming through?
I would want to look at two levels of intervention as NCIC. One is how consequences would be seen to be what will tame the wayward politicians, if you will. Because there's individuals who you would use toxic language and incite people, etc. And I think we have a problem of attitude and behavior. Now, NCIC, there are three ways in which we are going to make sure that there are consequences that cannot be avoided. One is the social consequences, where we are now going to name and shame individuals, politicians, who are notorious of hate speech or incitement. And we have said that we are going to have a wall of shame. And I would say that many politicians would think twice before they want to be seen or to be shamed. So that's one consequence, social consequence. The second one is political consequence, which is related to it. And the political consequence is that if you have been named and shamed, then you should not be eligible to be elected to a position or to be appointed to a national position or any other position for that matter. And if a politician knows that they are not going to be cleared to run for an office, then they'll think twice before they make the utterances. And this is not just theoretical. Just recently from Msambweni by-elections, we as NCIC dealt with two politicians, or a politician and a leader. And in this case, because it has been in public domain, I can say that what happened with, say, Mr. Sifuna, the Secretary General of ODM, we agreed that he is going to offer 50 hours of community work. And this is work which will be supervised so that we see there is that consequence. And from there, he would not want to go that route again. And then we want others to know if they are also, if they have such offenses, they will also have consequences. The final one is criminal consequence. That after that, we will now go to court. And with these three levels, I would say that we are going to begin to see change. Yeah. Secondly, is now that is as individual level, but also the political parties to which they belong. Political parties must also be held responsible and say, if you as a political party, you have senior politicians who are known to have offended other Kenyans, and still you clear them and you make them your candidates, we are also going to go after the political parties. Okay. And that is why I have brought it together, the Registrar of Political Parties, EACC, yeah, and IEBC, And we agreed when we met last week that we are also going to bring in DPP. This is a concerted effort, and we are going to use these institutions and say that really we need to have a political hygiene, if you will. We cannot have Kenyans who are political thugs really holding positions in this country anymore. And that is the responsibility not only of NCIC to hold them to account, it is political parties as well. Then finally, the Wananchi themselves. Because sometimes they are the ones who are cheering this as their heroes. We also now are going to have a public education, more than just the civic or vote education. We are going to have public education as part of this roadmap to 2022 elections, where we will tell, especially young people, that really you also must be held accountable. If goons they come and they are part of that crowd, we'll also go after them because we know them. So that is what I would say is the strategy going forward. The strategy that we are going to have as we move to 2022.
I will take a quick break here on the Monday Report Town Hall. When we come back, I see a lot of your feedback here on the Monday Report, hashtag at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, and the videos that you sent in as well. We'll play that in the next half an hour right after this break. See you shortly.